Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first of our weekly COVID-19 and Your Business. I am Kathy Cocus with Kitsap Economic Development Alliance. I'm the Business Development Director, and we're happy that you were able to make time to join me today with our panelists, who we'll be introducing in a moment. So, Teresa, can you do the next slide, please? Okay, so I'm joined today by Monica Blackwood, CEO of West Sound Workforce, Jaime Forsyth, Business Advisor for the Kitsap Small Business Development Center, and Dan Weedin, Business Risk Advisor for Toro Consulting. Thank you all for joining us on our inaugural webinar. Just a few slides about what KEDA is doing to help you in this time of reinvention and innovation. On our website, if you go to the home page at the top bar, you'll see COVID-19. That's going to take you to our COVID page where there's current updates, lots of resources on the side panel, and those are the categories that we have the resources in: business resources, medical, private, public, and government. Teresa's done a great job of separating all those little links out. And a reminder, don't you do it, my internet connection is unstable. We'll hope it plays nice. Anything that's posted, be always looking for the most current thing and be vigilant, because things change in an hour or in minutes. So just to remember that. Okay, Teresa. Other things that we're doing, Teresa is posting blog posts daily. That's just an example. And when you go to the blog, then you will also see recent posts if there's something else you want to see. These slides will be on our website, correct, Teresa? So you don't have to worry about taking a screenshot or trying to write things down. It'll all be available for you shortly. Next. We're also posting on social media. We're sending out newsletters. If you are not on our newsletter list, you can sign up on our website or just send Teresa or myself an email and we'll get you added. Next. And lastly, we want to hear how things are going for you right now. If you are on our newsletter mailing list, you would have received this link in that last newsletter. It is also online, and so we ask that you do that just so that we can track what's really needed to assist you in the best way possible. Next. And now I'd like to introduce Dan, who we saw a moment ago in the opening slides. Dan?
Hello, Kathy. How's my volume?
I think it's good.
Good. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. First of all, I hope that each one of you, your loved ones, your employees, everybody in your extended life, I hope everyone is well and healthy. This is a crazy and dangerous time for all of us, not only for our business, for our life, and so I hope all of you are well. Today, what I'm going to be talking about is from a crisis response perspective, how to respond and how to recover for your business and for your life. So without further ado, Teresa, let's get started. Step number one, how's your story going to end? As you see behind me, I have a road headed to somewhere. This road is headed to somewhere. And there's an end. Just like one of my favorite television shows on Netflix, Stranger Things, we are in the upside down right now, I think. And so how is our last episode going to end? As much as we have to dig into what is happening right here, right now, and as Kathy said, it's volatile. Things are happening hourly, daily. We also need to start strategizing about what our ideal outcome is when we're even past the first recovery phase. I'm telling my clients to use September 1 as a gauge. That's not when recovery starts. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That's when I think we are back to, and what would be considered a new normal, where you want to be on September 1. And I want you to be specific. What products or services will you be offering clients? It likely will be different than what you did, that you were doing on February 15th, right? You have probably had to innovate. We'll talk about that as well. But what will you have to be offering because our world is different? Just because the doors are reopened doesn't mean social distancing is going to end. It doesn't mean that things are going to go back to what we had before. We have to look at our own industry and determine how will that look for each one of us. What will your employee situation look like? Will you need more employees? Some businesses will. Will you need to be smaller and leaner? Will people have to work more virtually, even in a time when we are in what is considered a recovered phase? Will you be the same? What positions, and I'm not talking about individual employees, but what positions will be essential for you? It could be around technology, because if we're doing all of this virtual work, your technology risk has changed, right? So what are those positions that are essential to you? And then really importantly, what about your supply chain? You know, as your supply chain are vendors, suppliers, who will your key partners be? Will you need to add or reduce? And one of the things we're going to talk about here in a few minutes is, how is your supply chain doing right now? How is that impacting you? If you're in manufacturing, that could be a really key issue. So what I think that the most important thing that you can actually even get out of today is to look ahead, invest time into writing down, and this might be a leadership team thing. What do we want to look like on September 1? What is our anticipation? What is our final story? Okay, Teresa, go ahead and click over. Step 2. Oh, and by the way, I want to say, I know you can obviously go on chat and ask questions. If you have a private question that you want to ask me that you don't want to share with everybody, you can go to the chat and private message me. Nobody else will see it. I'll respond to you. So if you feel like you want to do that either now or later, please feel free to. So step 2, we need to reverse engineer this. If we're trying to figure out what our end looks like, we also now need to figure out what needs to be put in place in order to get there. So once you've figured out what it looks like, what that final chapter is, what must you create, develop, and implement and plan for to realize that final scene? There are things that you probably aren't doing right now, but you must set some timeline for. Innovation is critical. It's absolutely critical. One of my neighbor down the street, she has been teaching piano for like 25 years. She's fantastic. She's gone to a Facebook Live, or not a Facebook Live, but I'm sorry, a FaceTime. That is how she is now doing piano or teaching piano. She's had to do that. And the reality is she may still need to do that because she may have students that are still uncertain well into the future. And so that may be something she's got to do. So innovation in your business is critical. And this, I don't care what your industry is, you must create virtual options, delivery options, and new offerings. What is it that you've been offering as a product or service that you can turn virtual? Now, we've been into this about 3 weeks. Many of you have already done that, and you've done it expertly. But if you haven't, or even if you have, what more can you do? You've got to create those options now. This crisis is going to have a tail. And by what I mean by tail is, we know that flattening the curve is what the goal is now, so we don't overrun the hospitals. But what we've been told over and over by the medical scientists is, until a vaccine is set up, people are going to keep getting COVID-19 over the course of the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. So this is going to last. This tail is going to last into next year. This is important. Set timelines. When does each of these need to be in place or implemented? Who will need to lead those initiatives? They don't all have to be you as the owner. You might be able to contract some of it out. You may have employees that can help. Who will need to, I said that, how will they be kept accountable? What will your communication look like? There's a lot of communication that's been going out. I've seen some really good ones, and I've asked permission to hold some of those. I'm going to be putting together just something as a resource, what good communications during crisis looks like. You also need good communications as you work through this process. So step one was, what's the end? Step two is, let's reverse engineer this and figure out what needs to be put into place. Teresa? Okay. Step three, this is where we're all kind of been living. What do we do now? What do we do today? So after you've invested some time to figure out what the end of this picture looks like, and then you've reversed engineered it, now let's focus on today. If you have not already created a written and well-communicated company COVID-19 plan, you really need to do that now. I have a client, and this was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, I've lost track of time. I've got a client who contacted me and said their number one client, really large one that they had just had to deal with, required that within a couple of days they want to see their COVID-19 plan. Why? Because they want to make sure that there was a plan in place for them to continue to operate. Each one of you, as we go through this, may be asked by somebody, whether it's a client, whether it's a supply chain vendor, they want to know what your COVID-19 plan is. That includes communication templates. How are you going to respond when an employee is a confirmed case? If you have 50 employees, and maybe you're essential business and you have people still working, what does that mean when that first person gets it, because we know that's going to happen? How do you deal with the anxiety that that's going to bring up? How do you deal with employee safety and concerns? And as I mentioned, supply chain concerns. This does not have to be a long document. I created one for my client that was 1 page, but it needs to be created and needs to happen, and your employees and supply chain need to know that you have it. Second, create a simple business continuity plan. And I mean simple. I'm talking 2 or 3 pages, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be bullet pointed, but there are other perils that are going to come out of this. There's cash flow volatility, as we all know. There could be property damage. For some of you who are retail spaces, if there is continued issues, people have asked me, what about looting? What about vandalism? What are some things that you have to have in place for that? And we'll talk about insurance in a minute. There is going to be ongoing employee and anxiety or disengagement. As this goes on, no matter what happens from a federal or state standpoint regarding funding, which Jamie's going to talk about later, there's going to be continued anxiety, and I think it's going to come from how employees are dealing with family. I've got a client that his key employee had to go on unemployment because they had a family member that was high risk. She could no longer go into work and take that risk. So as this continues, be prepared for that employee anxiety and what you're going to do in that case. I highlighted, bolded this, death of an owner. The reality is that on a good basis, at least what we're hearing, probably 240,000 Americans will die. So many have died already. And CEOs, owners, entrepreneurs, all of you, me and all our panelists, we're not immune from that. What happens if an owner or key leader dies? And that's not only from COVID-19, but it's what's on our minds today. What happens next? That continuity needs to be figured out. It's a hard conversation, but it needs to happen. Finally, be resolved. Don't panic. This is about resolve right now. Leaders must remain positive, but still be candid. The most important thing that all of you can do with everybody in your employee and in your supply chain is to speak with clarity. Be transparent about plans and next steps. And in reality, I don't know is a real answer. If you don't know the answer, you can say you're working on it, but you don't know. I don't know is a legitimate response. Show empathy. As I mentioned, a lot of your employees are anxious today. They may be more anxious in the future. When you're making decisions, boil it down to that old tried and true cost-benefit analysis. What's the pros? What's the cons? And let's do this without emotion as much as possible. Be visionary, strategic, and innovative. And this is important for all of us. Ask for help. I have people in my life and who I have hired to help me when I need it. And we all have to ask for help from each other now. And then finally, in this slide, take care of yourself. We all know the old adage about put the oxygen mask on you first. If you are a leader of employees, you got to take care of or a family. You got to put the oxygen mask on you first. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. Step 4, what to prepare for. This is in the recovery. My projection is the recovery is going to start here when schools reopen. Right now, we know that's pretty much the end of April. It could be extended. But when the state and the governor says we're okay to send kids and teachers back to school, that's when the recovery phase is starting. You do not want to be in the locker room or stretching. You want to be just like her. You want to be in the starting blocks, ready to go. You do this by doing the strategy, what we just talked about. Figure out what the end looks like. Reverse engineer that. Put in timelines and metrics to innovate and to implement so that you're poised and ready to go. Because when that gun is fired, you've got to be able to sprint out of the gates or sprint off the blocks. Focus on helping your clients and customer base. This is a helping time. I know there's essential businesses and non-essential businesses. We're all essential. Whether we're a B2B or a B2C, we're all essential as businesses and as humans. You're part of this economic recovery. You employ people. You have valuable products and services that are needed. We've all got to survive this. That means we've got to create revenue for ourselves and figure out ways to help people. That's how we create revenue and help everybody in this economy and during this crisis or during the recovery. Teresa, next one. Here's a quick list of some frequently asked questions that I've had over the last 3 weeks. I want to go through insurance really quickly. As many of you know, I'm also an insurance broker, and so I've gotten many calls on this. Number 1, business interruption. There's been some talk about that in the news. Here's the deal on business interruption. In order for any of your business interruption to take effect, there has to be direct damage. A virus does not cause direct damage. It's not a fire, it's not a tornado, it's not a windstorm, it's not a water damage. So there is no coverage if you have to shut down for a virus. Property coverages, though, however, if something happens, like I mentioned, vandalism, malicious mischief, something happens as a result, that is still in place. So make sure your insurance is in force. Insurance companies are taking an approach of delaying cancellations, but most of them are only for 60 days. So if you miss a couple payments, they're not going to cancel you, but that will end because they're still covering a lot of other things. General liability is still an important part. I put in directors and officers. If you are in a nonprofit or if you have directors and officers in a private situation, you could be sued for discrimination or letting people go. We'll hear Monica talk about employees later. So you need to keep that in force. Employment practices liability, I've just seen that there could be a moratorium on a lot of companies writing that. So if you have it, that's good. Finally, on insurance, life insurance, I'm highlighting this. If you follow me, you're gonna hear me say this a lot. Life insurance has never been more important. It is one of the most searched terms on Google because now more than ever, we're looking at our own mortality. Business debt does not disappear with death. Business debt does not disappear with death. If you are the owner and you have business debt and somebody else is going to take over when you're done, whether it's your spouse, that needs to be taken care of. There are still some opportunities to get life insurance without exams, without blood work. Let me know if you have questions on that, but this is becoming critically important. Funding and loans, you're going to hear a lot more about that. People ask me, I'm sending them to somebody else, and it's probably going to be Jaime. You're going to hear a lot more about that. Technology, cybercrime has increased. I want to reiterate, cybercrime, there's a lot of bad people out there who are taking advantage of things like Zoom. There are tricks to dealing with that. Make sure you have cyber insurance. And also learn how to deal with making sure that you're protecting your virtual events and meetings. If you are an essential business, employees, customers, supply chain, communication is critical. As we talked about, be very straightforward with what's going on. If you're not an essential business in the terms of the state of Washington, be nimble, be creative, be communicative. In everything you do, really work at being helpful. I think that's it on frequently asked questions. Finally, I've got a lot of free resources on my blog. My website started the retool in mid-February. We were supposed to be up by April 1, but things happened. So it should be up next week. But if you go to my blog, I have a COVID-19 section where I've got resources, and actually what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to add how to keep your Zoom meetings and events safer and how to protect them. But I've got a ton of free resources, podcasts, blogs, videos, all of that. If you go to my website and if you subscribe, you can get updates from me. For each of you who are on this, a discussion with you at my cost is being offered to each one. Just email me, tell me you're part of this webinar, and I'm happy to have an independent, private conversation about some of the things that you're concerned about. No cost, no obligation. It's my gift. And then I have a COVID-19 hotline available. You can find that on my blog as well. Teresa, I don't know how I did as far as timing. Am I still in good shape? I can't hear.
I think we're okay.
So I'm happy. I want to leave some time for questions, and so that's why I kind of worked through this as quickly as I could. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I probably could use some help because I haven't been looking at the chat. So if anybody has any questions that came through there on chat, that would be great.
I didn't see any direct questions for you except about the slides, and they all have the link for that now.
Okay.
We've also posted the link for the survey because, my bad, I just did a screenshot for the presentation and didn't include the hyperlink. So we've, and Teresa will probably fix that for me at some point.
So Kathy, what I'll do is, last chance to ask any questions, but again, you can ask me, but I would just want to summarize really quickly. Look to the future. What's the end of your road look like? It's going to be successful. We're going to all make it through this. I'm a positive guy. We're going to be there, but you have to know what it's going to look like for you is how you distribute your products and services. Figure that out, reverse engineer it, understand what needs to be put into place and when. Now go to today, business continuity planning, COVID-19 planning, and then that's how you can work forward and deal with it today. And for all, I have a question. John, I see John has a question about cybersecurity. I can talk about cyber insurance, but I'm not sure I can talk about cybersecurity from a technology standpoint. I have one here. Dan, more people need to hear this. Do you have something that can be shared to a wider audience? Yeah, as Monica and I've been sharing to a wide audience all over the place. So here's what you can do. You can subscribe to my blog. I'm blogging almost every day. If you go to Weedin Unleashed on Facebook, I'm putting an almost daily, started to be daily, and now it says an almost daily video update on it. If you go to my blog, I've got a ton of free resources. I'm continuing to put out podcasts on this. So if you go to my website at danweedin.com, subscribe to my newsletter, you'll get probably more than you ever intended.
So, John, if you can respond, did that answer your question, or do you need to follow up with Dan?
I'm looking really quickly. Oh, Paula just wrote, you can add cybersecurity to your home. Great. That's good news. That's good information from Paula.
Hi, Paula. Can you? I do have a question, and that is your one piece tidbit of advice about the fact that the virus is not covered by business disruption insurance. In the cybersecurity insurance field, what are you seeing that business owners and their technology advisors may not know about what is or what is not covered with people moving out of their offices into more remote locations?
You know, I'm glad you bring that up. Can I have 2 minutes to respond to that, Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a great point. People are now more virtual, employees are more virtual, and what that's caused is, let's say that I was working for Monica. She said, Dan, you got to go work from home, and I'm going in and I'm going into our portal or our website, whatever. Well, my neighbor or 2 neighbors down may not be very nice, and I may not have the infrastructure. There is an increase in cybercrime for breaking in. So what's really important is, before you go too far down the line with virtual, make sure that there are rules in place. From an insurance standpoint, you need to make sure that your cyber insurance protects for off-premises, that it protects for off-premises. Reach out to me individually if that's something. Like I said, I'm making myself available to any of you. If you have a cyber policy, even if I'm not your broker, I'm happy to at least help answer that question. But you need to have coverage for off-premises on that. And it used to be that you were worried about being in a coffee shop. Today, that's not the case. You're worried about being at home where your security may not be as good. John, I hope that answered your question. I don't have a lot of time, so I hope that was good enough.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So thank you, everyone. Happy to answer questions. Be safe, be well out there.
Okay, and now we're welcoming Monica.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And I join Dan in wishing everyone good health and best wishes through all of this, especially when it comes to your mental and emotional health. It's really hard right now. And I have a 13-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son who are getting a little tired of being at home. So I join you, but make sure you are taking care of yourself, as Dan said, so that you can be there for everybody else. Let me jump into a few things about managing employees during this time. There's been quite a few pieces of legislation that have come out over the last 10 days or so. Much, of course, was drafted and enacted, and lots of questions to follow out of those pieces of legislation. So hopefully I can shed a little bit of light for you on these things. The first one is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA, that was drafted and signed into law mid-March and actually became effective yesterday. That act covers the things that you've heard most about, including the emergency federal paid sick leave and the expanded FMLA. So those things we'll dig into in just a minute. The other piece of legislation that is really new is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, the CARES Act. That includes things like the Payroll Protection Program that Jaime will talk about later, avenues for small business and some medium-sized businesses for funding. But I am going to focus on the expanded unemployment benefits that surround that. So I just didn't want to ignore the other major pieces of that legislation. So Teresa, can you forward, please? Let's jump into the FFCRA and the emergency paid sick leave. This piece of legislation actually covers all employers who have 500 or less employees. So that is a wide swath of employers and companies that now all of a sudden have to pay 80 hours of paid sick leave for their employees. There is a small business exemption if you are 50 or fewer employees, and we can go over that. Well, we'll just go over it right now. The small business exemption includes those small employers who would be providing leave would exceed the revenues of the business and cause the employer to cease operations at a minimal capacity, or the absence of employees would entail a substantial risk of financial health and operational capacities because of the specialized skill, knowledge, and responsibilities of those employees, or simply there's not sufficient workers to run at a minimal capacity for those small business employers. So one of those three things must apply to you if you are 50 or fewer employees, and then you can get the exemption. The 80 hours of paid sick leave, this is prorated for work schedule, so your part-time employees are going to be prorated, not getting that full 80 hours. It does not supersede Washington paid sick time laws, so they still have the 40 hours minimum of paid sick leave. I said part-time employees are prorated, but also employees with variable working schedules. You want to take the last 6-month look-back period and determine what those employees are entitled to for their paid sick leave with the Emergency Act here. Pay is to employees for 100%. It's a cap at $511 a day, or for the total of 10 days, $5,110 aggregate. In some categories that we'll talk about later, pay is capped at 2/3 pay, or $200 a day, for $2,000 in the aggregate. New hires are eligible for this. So let me repeat that. If somebody has just started working for you 2 days ago, they are eligible for that time. You don't want to leave those out. And another thing is that employees may be able to stack their leave. For instance, they could use 2 weeks of this emergency paid sick leave, and then they could go and use their 40 hours of Washington paid sick leave. They do not have to take it all at the same time, but they can stack it, so be aware of that. Payroll tax credits are given to employers for reimbursement of the payment that they make out to their employees. Yeah. Next, oh, let me see. One more thing, sorry, Teresa. The payroll tax credits, those tax credits only apply to the time that is taken by employees for the federal emergency paid sick leave aspects. So you can't use that, for instance, in the stacking situation, you can't use that other 40 hours of Washington paid sick time and put that towards your payroll tax credit benefit. So just make sure that you are tracking which leave people are taking at what time. So let's see, continued with the emergency paid sick leave. So this is in some respects broad, but also very narrow. There are 6 reasons why someone would be able to take this leave, and it is all based on the idea that they are unable to telework from home. Reason number 1, employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. Number 2, they've been advised by their healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns around the pandemic. Number 3, the employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and is seeking medical attention. So if they call you and say that they are going to self-isolate because they are concerned about their health and they want their 2 weeks of paid sick leave, they cannot have that 2 weeks of paid sick leave unless they are seeking medical attention as well. Number 4, caring for an individual who is subject to an order as described in number 1 and number 2. Reason number 5, caring for a child under 18 or an older child with disabilities because the school or childcare has been closed because of an order from one of our local governments or state, federal, or because care is unavailable due to COVID-19. And lastly, if somebody is experiencing significantly similar symptoms as specified by Health and Human Services in partnership with the Secretary of Treasury and the Secretary of Labor. Those are the reasons. Like I said, important to note that a child is broadly defined. Only basically the legislation states that it's under 18, a child is under 18 or has physical and mental disabilities. So that means you can take it off for your stepchild. That means you can take it off for, if you're a guardian and so forth. So that definition of child is very broad right now. And I mentioned before about the pay, and reasons number 4 and 5 are where somebody would receive 2/3 of their pay, so that $200 a day instead of 100% pay. So if they're taking off for those reasons, that would be the case. I see question about many cases testing being denied to the sick if they fall in low risk category. Yes, testing is being denied. It doesn't mean that they are not being advised by their medical provider to self-quarantine. Just because they don't have the test doesn't mean that they cannot access this paid sick leave. It's just that they need to be under advisement by their medical provider for that. Let's see. The emergency paid sick leave. These are kinds of some things to know about from an employer standpoint. I mentioned employees self-isolating without medical care or for other illnesses unrelated are not eligible for this. So if they stub their toe and have an issue with that stub toe, they can't take the 2 weeks of paid sick leave for that. It has to be something directly related to this pandemic in order to get that emergency paid sick leave. If employees can telework, they are not eligible for the coverage. So if they are home and they are, caring for their child, but they're able to telework, then they wouldn't necessarily be covered for this. It's only if they are unable to telework. Intermittent leave. Again, for the care aspect, there might be a couple of people that are sharing the duties of care for an individual. So people might ask about intermittent leave. That is completely up to you as the employer. You get to agree on that and decide whether or not it's okay, and if you want to take that additional burden of tracking on. So that's something to work out with your employee. Document the reason why, so that you can defend yourself if, for instance, another case you said no, you couldn't do that. So just make sure you document that. Return to work. So there's lots of questions about people coming out of isolation, out of quarantine. For those who have recovered or have self-isolated and not shown any symptoms, the CDC and OSHA have issued guidelines for individuals to re-enter the public. These are best practices for employers to follow those. And also in both of those, there's food for thought about whether or not you're really going to require a doctor's note to return to work if they are meeting the standards based on those guidelines, because doctors and providers are, as we know, are incredibly swamped, and getting a note might be a little more difficult, and it might cause your employee to not be able to return to work as quickly as possible. So think about that, especially if you have it in your requirements, and whether or not you want to waive that part right now. I do have a sample kind of form that an employee could fill out and say, you know what, I have not experienced these symptoms in the last 5 days, and based on guidelines that you know, I am able to re-enter work, and they can sign that, and you can get that to them. And if anybody would like that form, I'm happy to share that. And then again, lastly, the tax credit is only for those paid time coverage that is associated with the pandemic. It's not for anything else. So, Kathy, or sorry, Teresa. Expanded FMLA. So here's the other part of the Families First Act, and expanded FMLA. This still falls under the guidelines of all employers are covered with this if you have 500 employees or less. And that means there are so many companies that I know of that are now starting to have to beef up on their knowledge of FMLA, because normally they're not subject to it. So this specific expanded FMLA portion, you are part of that, and so you need to take heed in that. You can get the exemption, again, for small employers of less than 50. It's the same as the paid sick leave statute. This has different eligibility than the rest of FMLA. Employees need to work for 30 days of employment. So instead of the 1,250 hours that falls with the rest of FMLA, if an employee has worked for 30 days, they are now covered by this FMLA. It is for 12 weeks. The first 2 weeks is unpaid, and therefore the employee can use that paid sick leave if they need to, or they can use their state sick leave, or if they have vacation, they can use that, and so forth. Then after that first 2 weeks, it's 10 weeks paid at the 2/3 rate, same as the sick leave, capped at $200, and $10,000 aggregate. Here's the caveat. This leave is only for the leave of care for child under 18 because of school or child care closure mandates by federal, state, and local jurisdictions related to the coronavirus pandemic, and where telework is not available. So this is not available for an employee who is recovering from COVID themselves. It's only for care. And this leave, along with the sick leave, both sunset on December 31st of this year, and you do not have to pay it out. If they don't use it all and they terminate, you do not have to pay this leave out. So let's see. Again, it's also important to document the information that you get from your employee regarding the expanded FMLA. If they request it, make sure you document the request and any information that you've given or observed for backup later. So next. And then we move on to the CARES Act, which is the most recent legislation that's out there. And most of what's in the CARES Act is about small business and funding resources that Jaime will cover. But there is an aspect to the expansion of unemployment insurance and unemployment compensation for your employees that I want you to be aware of. This is a federal pandemic unemployment compensation. It is in addition to the state compensation that employees would get. It pays $600 per week, paid in addition to and at the same time as the regular state benefits. So that basically makes them whole at 100% wages for the employees, and it runs through July 31st of this year. After that, it also allows for 13 additional weeks of unemployment benefits if somebody were to need it. If they have not been able to find a job and their state unemployment benefits have run out, there's 13 additional weeks available through the federal unemployment that they would be eligible for. And kind of the big one out of here is that there's expanded eligibility. This means that those who are self-employed solopreneurs, sole proprietors, independent contractors, gig employees, they are all eligible for this federal unemployment. You access that by filling out state unemployment paperwork. It also covers those who have had offers and accepted offers of employment and were supposed to start, but those offers of employment have been put on hold or have been withdrawn. Those employees are also eligible for this. One important thing that I want to say about unemployment, because I've seen a lot of this in the last couple of days, is please make sure that you have remembered to report your new hires to the state, because as these people, and this goes back to even if they've been working for you for a couple of years, you're supposed to report new hires to the state so that they know where people are working. But in a time like now, where people are filing for unemployment, it really bogs down the system when employees are not associated with employers. And then there's a lot more roundabout aspects that have to go on in order for those employees or newly parted employees can get their benefits. And this is and this can cause a lot of headache. So so please make sure you've reported your employees. And then kind of lastly are a couple of things that have been around for a really long time, but because legislation is kind of going crazy with some new things out there, it's drawn a lot of focus from HR and leadership, and the changed environment so quickly with respect to where people are working. Some pieces of legislation that have been around for a long time are things that I wanted to just make sure to review with you so that you cover it. The first one is the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act. If you're an employer who isn't used to having employees work from home, you'll want to take note about this. It is vital that you have an agreement in place with each employee, especially those who are hourly, that cover outlined expectations. You as the employer are responsible for paying for all time worked, and you hold the burden of proof. So this is something that you want to make sure that you cover with your employee. Figure out how to track time worked, iterate overtime policies that you have, focus on performance, tasks and deliverables, communication methods, etc., and get those in a written agreement, because again, it is your responsibility as the employer to have burden of proof. And if an employee is telling you that they're working, then you have to pay them until you can determine that they are not. So make sure that you're covering yourself for that. The USERRA Act. So it's been a while since our Washington National Guard has been activated, but it is by our governor now, which means those who serve in uniform outside of typical working hours are now called away. In some cases, many employers, especially small ones, need to remember the responsibilities under USERRA. Those who are called to duty may have to quit their jobs, but upon deactivation and back to civilian life, they are allowed their position or the position that they would have achieved had they been there continuously, so long as they gave the employer advance notification and, if applicable, have an honorable discharge. So make sure that you're following USERRA as well. And then one note about ADA and the EEOC. Those with COVID-19 diagnosis or similar symptoms are likely to be covered under the ADA as well. So you want to remember that. It is illegal to ask about an individual's condition. That said, the EEOC came out about 2 weeks ago with a clarification that because this is a recognized pandemic, you can do a couple of things. First, if an employee calls out sick, the employer is able to ask something to the effect of, are you ill because of COVID-related symptoms? In essence, if you are asking about coronavirus or COVID specifically, you are okay to do so. Do not ask about anything else. Also, there was a lot of questions about taking temperatures of employees before their shift. The EEOC has come out because this is a covered pandemic. Employers are allowed to do that, but you need to be very, very careful in doing this because you as the employer bear quite a risk. You need to properly take temperatures, how to protect the information determined after the readings, protecting employee confidentiality, and so many other things. So and you have to also have proof that you as the employer were only doing this because of the pandemic. So please, if you're going to do this, be very, very careful. And with that, I think that I've wrapped up a bunch of things, but you are welcome to email me, call or text me. Right now, our voicemail is taking all of our phone calls and we're checking them at our office. So happy to chat, share any other updates that I might have. I also have been posting up blog notices and things like that that I've been sharing with KEDA as well. So happy to share anything that I can find out for you. Thanks.
Thanks, Monica. And again, we will be taking your questions at the end. And feel free to post them and we'll track them as well. So thank you, Monica. And Jaime, you're on.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I know how stressful a time it is. I've been hearing from a lot of small business owners, and I know what distress you're in right now. One thing I'm noticing as I'm looking at my own slide here is I forgot to put my own contact information. So maybe Teresa can add that to what's posted, but the easiest way to get me these days, besides signing up as a client and scheduling time, is to send email to kitsapsbdc@wwu.edu. And so before I get started, I just wanted to say in the chat box, maybe everybody could tell us their favorite local business that's still open that they're supporting, or if you're on here and you're a local business owner and you're open, please let us know. And use the chat box to do that. And if you don't have anything to say, then check out what's open, and please think about going out today and continually, regularly to support our local businesses that are open. Again, it's just so important now that the ones who have managed to stay open, that we're keeping them open. So just wanted to put in that plug. And before I get started on the loans, I do want to give a little background on what the SBDC is and what we can do for you. So basically, 40 years ago or so, the SBA decided that small businesses needed support, and they created this idea of the Small Business Development Center, administered in all 50 states through local state universities and colleges. So in the state of Washington, it's mostly Washington State University, and that's our headquarters for our Washington State network. But in our case, Western Washington University actually has the biggest single small business development center in the state. And with all of their 4-year programs at Olympic College and at Peninsula College, they really wanted to make a bigger impact on our community and support the small businesses. And so I am the one-person remote office, Small Business Development Center here in Kitsap County. Typically, my office is in the Polsbo Library, which is closed for renovation till June, regardless. But I serve all of Kitsap County, and the Bremerton Chamber and KEDA have also offered space for me if we can get back to business here pretty soon before the libraries open. So when you come and sign up for us in better times, we can do a lot of things for business owners, from helping them decide if it's time to expand, to help them, launch the businesses, to help them when they're trying to figure out how to when they want to retire and turn it over to their employees, when they want help getting loans. We have a lot of clients getting sent to us from the lenders to help people put those loan packages together, which can seem kind of daunting. Business plans, working through cash flow issues, all that kind of stuff we can help you do. Right now, of course, as you can guess, we're really focused on helping people take advantage of these these pretty darn generous loan packages and opportunities that are available right now. So with that, I would say, again, that link down there is for if you want to sign up and be, one of our clients, then it's really a lot easier for me to respond to you and set up time to meet with you and stuff, because as a free service, we need to know who you are and who we're serving in order for us to justify that we're having an impact in Kitsap County. So if you want to go on to the next one there, Teresa. Teresa? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start with the Economic Impact Disaster Loan, or EIDL, which that is up and running, and it's up and running in its third iteration. So if you applied for it before Monday, you need to apply again. And just in case, what I would do too is make sure that all of the information you're inputting, that you're actually saving to your own documents. You have all that information ready, just in case there's a fourth iteration, which I don't think there will be. But what happened was, it's just like, as you can imagine, this happened so fast, and there was a high sense of urgency. And so, we can be very forgivable that there have been some attempts that didn't quite stick, and they had to redo it. But as of Monday, they brought in a third party to help streamline this process. It seems like it's working smoothly. And one of the key features of it is the fact that if you apply and you're one of the businesses that is, allowed to apply, like, you can't be a marijuana store or whatever. There's some specifications that'll tell you on the loan. But if you can apply, then within 3 business days, you'll get a $10,000, and the terminology is forgivable loan. And what you can think to yourself is grant. Technically, the government can't give away public funds. That's why it's called a forgivable loan. But in any other world, that's a grant. So again, even if you get denied a loan from EIDL, you will still get the $10,000 forgivable loan. I was just on a webinar with our SBA representative yesterday, and as of yesterday, I understand there isn't any way right now for you to have to account for how you spent that $10,000 forgivable loan. However, if that changes and in some way on your taxes you have to report it or something, I would keep track of how you're spending that money and keep it aside in case you need it. Things are changing minute by minute, but for right now, that's how that works. And so it's a 30-year, up to a 30-year loan, up to $2 million, a very a nice rate. But again, if you qualify, and the big thing is it includes contractors and self-employed. So you don't even have to have, an employee identification number. You can get by with your social security number if you contract your services or are self-employed. The best thing to do, the best advice I can give you is just apply, because there's no harm in trying. And from what I've heard, just about any business is going to be able to get at least the $10,000 forgivable loan, that the intent is to use that towards supporting your business during that time. Turnaround 3 to 6 weeks for EIDL, but 3 business days again for the $10,000. And it's hard to put on one slide all the different, all the information there is about this. And like I said, it's changing, but I'll try and respond to questions at the end to go into more detail. And so for right now, I'm going to go on to the Paycheck Protection Program, which I think would be more, it should have been called the Payroll Protection Program, because it's really for the business owners to maintain their staff. The idea of this is that it's a 2-month cover, for your business. So 250% of your average monthly payroll from the prior year. And again, they're very forgivable. If you don't, if you started this year, just go for it. You can just try it because they're very forgiving. And if you get rejected from either program, you have a way to appeal. So if your business there's just something unique about it, like, you haven't been in business long enough, then through the appeal process, that's where someone just works with you on how do you, justify what you're asking, and how do you show, like, for example, the SBA gave me an example yesterday where they just said, well, you've been a really good financial manager of your business, but you just went through a divorce and your spouse took half of the business, so you don't look good on paper, but if you look at your track record. And so that's the kind of example they said where you might get immediately rejected, and then you just have to have your documentation ready to show that you're a good risk for this. And they're, as far as I can tell, they're being super forgiving, making things as easy as possible for you to get access, to this money. And the idea, especially if you're a very small business, when it's just yourself, keeping yourself on the payroll ought to be pretty easy. It gets more complicated when you look at businesses that have more employees and they've already applied for unemployment, and you can rehire them in order to go through this 2-month program of financial coverage. And you may, it's all a numbers game, there's risks involved, but it may be that you can extend someone's unemployment if you can keep people on payroll for 2 months under this program that's, covered. And it's a forgivable loan, meaning that, again, forgivable loan grant. If you hold to all of the requirements of it, then that loan is forgivable. Now, here's the thing. So this is supposedly going to be available by tomorrow. And that's assuming, that the banks are ready for you. And right now, what you need to be thinking about, if this is interesting to you, is making contact with a bank who says that they'll welcome you to apply for this loan. Some banks are saying they'll only take their current clients, but most banks, from what I am hearing, are really smart and saying, we'd love to have you as a new client. And so they're just taking people as they come to apply for this. Now, if you apply for this and are awarded this amount that's equal to 250% of your average monthly payroll, then you have 8 weeks, to spend that out. And then, and I don't even know if the banks are ready for this, you have to report back to the bank to show that you have met all the criteria to have 100% or maybe somewhat less based on how you spent the money. So the bank is going to decide whether you held yourself accountable to get it 100% forgiven. This is putting a lot on the banks, but they have 60 days to respond to you to say if they agree that your loan should be, forgiven, or what part of it should be forgiven. And I assume if you're working closely with your bank, you ought to have a very good outcome with this. And again, I haven't heard anyone in particular that says they're ready to go, but the date the Small Business Administration is hoping that the banks will start processing these loans is tomorrow. Again, they're all contingent on getting all the information they need from the SBA to do it, but also these are banks that are already doing 7A SBA loans and are used to dealing with the SBA. So they aren't expecting, I don't think it's going to take too much to ramp up on that. Turnaround on that is a lot quicker, 2 weeks instead of 3 to 6 weeks on the EIDL loan. And it also note that the other ones close at the end of the year. This one closes on June 30th. It's also it's a great, even if you had to pay back some of it, it's up to 2 years at 0.5%, which, that's just above nothing. So again, it's about people needing to call around and finding a bank that, if their bank doesn't provide this, then just needing to find a bank and line up and start getting, I assume I know some of them are at least, letting you know what paperwork you need to have together in order to just fill out the application and get it processed. There's, I would just say as soon as possible for any of these loans, because I think there's $7 billion in these pots and maybe that's just for the PPP, I'm not sure. But anyway, there is right now a limit, and we don't know if it's going to be refilled once the pot is empty. So I would just encourage you to make decisions as quickly as you can about what direction you want to work. And the EIDL, the EIDL, that's one you do online. And the Paycheck Protection, again, is one you do through your lender. There's also talk about a $10,000 grant being available from the state coming soon. And I haven't heard any more details about that yet, but stay tuned for that. And now I'm thinking maybe we can do some questions here. I'm trying to think, Teresa, do you want to, I haven't been watching all of the chat box. Do you want to ask questions? If you can see where the top of those questions were. We didn't have this one part planned out.
No.
I can't scroll back up.
Okay, so Kathy, have you been monitoring those?
I have. I've been trying to. So a couple of questions about where in the application do they find the checkbox for the $10,000 advance?
You know, so that's part of this new, because it was for a while, I think it was iteration 2, was that there was a separate application for the $10,000. And now I know it's part of it. So if you have completed that without checking a box, then you missed something. So that's all I can say right now, because it's just been since Monday. And if anybody has gone through and filled out the application, I know it's either an assumption or there's a box to check, and I'm sorry, I don't know which one it is. I think it almost might be automatic.
I had heard that it was at the end, but I haven't gone through it. Wait, Dan, did you go through it? Do you remember where the checkbox was for the advance?
You know, I did it this morning, and
I saw
it did not.
Checkbox at the end. Monica said checkbox at the end.
That's what I had thought. Okay, cool.
I just got a submission number that came after I clicked submit. I didn't see a checkbox, so that was just me. So I don't know if I did something wrong, but I got a submission number, but I did not see for the advanced.
Okay, let's see. There was a question on the interest rates for the different loans.
Right. It's 3.75 for the EIDL loan and 0.5 for the Paycheck Protection Program.
And if you're a nonprofit, the EIDL loan is 1 point lower. Yeah. Let's see. Somebody is asking, can you apply for the EIDL and the Paycheck Protection at the same time?
Yes, you can. There's just no double dipping. So the $10,000 advance that you get from EIDL will be applied to the Paycheck Protection Program. So there's $10,000 less forgiveness for the Paycheck Protection Program, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so under the EIDL is the $10,000 for the Express Bridge loan.
No, that's a completely different loan, and I didn't even get into that because it just seemed like people are really focused on the other ones. But the two that 99% of people are talking about right now, you know, are these other two. So the Express Bridge loan, I haven't even looked at it for a week or so, but there are other options. And if you go to our resource site that I listed on that first slide, and you can just Google WWU SBDC and get there too. But that shows you an array of options as well as other funding options that are offered by private entities, by financial institutions and stuff.
Okay.
But that's...
What loan, if any, will help owners pay themselves that have been taking owner draws instead of being on the payroll?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, you know what, that's a good question. I think you should go through as if that were salary, if I were doing it for the Paycheck Protection Plan. And again, all they can do is say, no, you filled that in incorrectly. Because again, my view on this is that, again, they're being very forgiving. So as long as you do it in good faith, and if you had a draw and, you know, fill it in, you know, as your salary, I'm gonna look into that. But again, I would say all they can do is come back to you and say, no, you didn't put that in the right place. And that's what I got directly from the SBA. You know, again, if you get rejected for something, they'll just work with you to, you know, correct the information and keep moving forward. But I will look into that particular one, and I will get back to KEDA with it. Will that work,
Yeah,
Teresa?
we can post any follow-up
Okay.
online. So look for that.
Yeah. But I know you're not, I know there's a way to handle it. I mean, I know you're not out of luck just because that's the way you handled, you know, paying yourself. But let me just, you know, see if I can make that clear.
It just may take a bit longer. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't think it'll take a bit longer. I just think in terms of just how they need to handle that in terms of this particular thing. It's interesting because it's like, in all of our webinars I've been on lately, I can't remember that actually came up, but it's an obvious question. So I'm going to find out for both of them.
Okay.
Actually, for the EIDL, it doesn't matter, but I'll find out and we'll post it.
Okay, here's another one. I have heard there is a max receipts, at least for nonprofits, of $8 million for the payroll loans, and there are only 2 categories of nonprofits that are even eligible, correct? Jamie, do you know
They
this
just say
answer?
nonprofits are eligible. There hasn't been any differentiation between the nonprofits that I've heard.
Yeah, 501c6s are not eligible, which is what chambers, associations, etc. are. But do you know anything about that $8 million for payroll loans?
Well, that would be, first of all, it sounds like there might be more than 500 employees, but because it's 250% for the Paycheck Protection, it's 250% of an average month, and anyone with a salary over $100,000, anything over $100,000 in salary can't be factored in. It's only supporting payroll up to salaries of $100,000 and below.
Oh, now she says it's $8 million in total budget, not payroll.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, that's a good clarification.
Yeah, I think that'll work there. 250% of an average month. So basically, and your payroll costs include everything, you know, from insurance and, you know, retiree payouts and, you know, everything but federal taxes, everything that goes into your monthly payroll but federal taxes and salaries over $100,000 can be factored into your payroll costs. And then it assumes that by saying 250% to cover 8 weeks, that's the intent of this, is to cover 8 weeks, is that will be enough to cover other costs as well. By saying not just 200% of a monthly, which would be 2 months, but the 50% allows you to pay leases and, you know, utilities and, you know, other overhead costs.
Cool. There was a question earlier about how do we know which banks in Kitsap County can do SBA loans?
Well, okay, so here's the thing. First of all, call your local bank. That would be the first thing. I will say, because I have had communication from, I know, for example, of our local banks, Kitsap Bank and Liberty Bay Bank have both been in touch. I think, I'm trying to remember First Federal, but again, our local banks would be great options. I would check with First Federal as well. I'm trying to remember if I heard from them or not, but yeah, check with your local banks. This is a great time to support local banks, and they ask them too, if you aren't already a client, if you can become a new client in applying for this loan.
Yeah, I did some quick research last night, and
Mhm.
Timberland, which is, headquartered in Grace Harbor County, is on the SBA list, as is.
Let me ask one thing about Timberland. I just had somebody contact me and say that Timberland is saying they'll only service their current clients.
Okay, so if you're a
That's
Timberland
anecdotal.
customer, yeah.
It's anecdotal, but I did have someone
Oh.
contact me. They were frantically looking for a bank.
Okay, so we will see what we can do about finding that. My guess is this will also be changing. Someone's asking if credit unions are included. I know that we've asked Kitsap Credit Union. They are not currently a 7A lender, but they are hoping to be added. So you would, I would just check back. Columbia is on the list, Key Bank, Chase, US Bank, Washington Federal, and Wells Fargo. Those, in addition to Kitsap Bank and Liberty Bay Bank, those are the ones I found.
Yeah, and again, it's best because, they are also going to be the ones that determine if you have fulfilled your obligations and can forgive 100% of the loan. So I would choose a bank if you can, that you want to build a relationship with, and start it off with that loan if you aren't already a customer. So I would think about, that it's somebody you might want to not just be using for this loan, but be building that banking relationship with.
Yeah, and I would encourage people, if you're not watching the webinar chat, to do so, because folks are posting some really good things that their individual businesses are doing, or they have some good resources to share as well. And we can make the chat available after the meeting also, because that gets recorded. So any other questions?
Okay. I'm just going to comment because I see John Morrissey from Kitsap Credit Union is saying, reach out to your loan officer, but John Morrissey, is there a plan for Kitsap Credit Union to get certified to process the Paycheck Protection Program? That's my question, because I did check with Kitsap Credit Union this week just to double check, because I want to make sure I am giving good information.
Yeah, that's what I thought. They're working on it, because what we talked to one of the business loan folks, and that was the same question we got. And we know Kitsap Bank is ramping up. Someone posted for Security is a 7A lender, so that's good to know. And some of these banks are in all communities. Some are, in just certain ones in Kitsap, but hopefully you're all going to have a relationship with a bank that is able to assist you. So Dan just told me I missed some questions, so I'm going to go back. Or Dan, do you want to just
Yeah, I saw a couple questions. One was on the EIDL. Let me get back to it. And credit for the EIDL loan, what kind of credit worthiness are they looking at?
Okay, so that's a great question. They are not they're not really worried about your credit score. They're also, it's just, things have been very much relaxed. I'm losing my words here. Collateral. You don't have to have, near the collateral you would have, for a typical loan. You really need to think about, what you're asking for. And again, if you get, they're just being very relaxed about this whole thing. And especially if you have a long track record, that says more to them than anything else, and if you get rejected, because a lot of times just on a technicality or because you don't fit the typical mold, you'll get rejected, and that's just part of the process. And from being rejected, you will have a conversation with a human being. Very cute kids on the screen there.
Yeah, you don't want them to have the contact information anymore, Teresa.
Yeah. But anyway, so again, it's just a process. Things are way more forgiving than in any typical loan process. If you get rejected, don't worry, follow the process to challenge that and have a conversation, to talk to someone directly to see what can be negotiated. So no one should be daunted from applying for the EIDL loan, because at a minimum, if you're a qualified business, there's a $10,000 forgivable loan.
Jaime,
Okay.
I saw another one from Paul. Kathy, do you want me to say that one? I've got it in front of me.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Paul said a client asked him, if the $10,000 forgivable loan is enough, do you need to apply for another loan via bank to keep the $10,000 and keep it forgivable? So that was at 11:17. So I don't know if I said that correctly, but that was his question.
Yeah, no, I actually see that one. But I mean, I guess if you have enough money, then don't ask for more, I guess. I don't know if there's anything more to that one or not.
Yeah, because you can turn down the EIDL loan, correct?
Yes,
and still
correct.
keep $10,000 advance, correct?
Yes, just by applying, there's a $10,000 forgivable loan. It's an amazing opportunity. And
can I
again,
ask, Jaime, can I ask you a question about that? So let's say that you do get turned down for the loan, but the $10,000, I know when I put in mine, you had to put in your bank and your routing number and account number. Does it just pop in there in 3 days? Do they tell you it's coming? How does that work?
Yes, that $10,000 will be in your bank in 3 business days without any human being having reviewed your loan application. It sounds too good to be true, but again, I don't know how far 7 billion goes when it's being spread across the entire country, but that's the number I've heard for one or both of these. So I would just do it now.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Are there any other?
Yeah, there's questions in the Q&A. If a solopreneur is not paying into state unemployment, how do you file for federal unemployment? Wasn't that the purpose of the expansion of Paycheck protection, Monica?
Yes, so that was part of the Paycheck, the unemployment aspect of the CARES Act, and people access that through applying through their state unemployment, even though they may or may not get state unemployment. That is the mechanism to access that. So, and I tried to jump on those Q&As and answer them as well. So hopefully I got everything, but
okay, super.
Sure.
Anything else that we've missed?
Oh, okay, let me talk about and just sort of reiterate. I see the one about Uber drivers or whatever. Yeah, this is totally, all of these are available to the gig economy and contractors, self-employed, whatever.
Yep.
You all get to apply for this as well. You're all good. And the only thing is, specifically, contractors, all of you, all y'all, just apply. When you don't have when you don't have an employee, an EIN number, you use your social security number, and all they can do is say no. But we've been told that, like every working person, basically, whether you're self-employed in some fashion or a small business owner, you can apply.
And Jaime, somebody is asking if there's a handy dandy PDF on preparing for these loans.
So first of all, going to your bank is preparing for the PPP, because they'll be giving you, the loan documents they're going to require. Now, this is a little interesting, and I'm not a banker, so anyone can jump in and correct me. But because this loan is 100% backed by the federal government, then the bank, doesn't have any skin in the game. They'll get a loan processing, fee for it. But I'm wondering if banks are going to be what they're going to require, or if the SBA is requiring them to require certain documents, or if they're leaving it up to the banks to determine creditworthiness. This is also new. I mean, the law was just passed last Friday, and banks are supposed to be ready to go tomorrow. So we'll share information as we have it. But depending on your bank, it may be they can give you the documents. They can tell you what documents they will require you to have ready in order to apply for this loan. The actual loan takes 2 minutes. The loan application takes 2 minutes to fill out, but it's what the bank is requiring you to include with the loan application that matters. And on the EIDL loan, again, I would just say that, when you're entering information into that, just in case, save it on another document. Now, the Small Business Development Center will be having webinars next week, focusing on, starting next week again, a new cycle of them, focusing on filling out the loans and on the on business resilience. The same kind of thing that Dan talks about, but these are people talking about it in a different way. So if you're interested, there's more information or information presented in a different way. And on that first slide of mine, there's a link to, I don't know if they have all of the dates, the signups up yet, but they're starting April 8th. And again, the 2 different webinars will going back and forth will be business resiliency and signing up for the loans. So if you haven't figured it out by then, you can sign up for one of these webinars through the SBDC, Kitsap SBDC. Yeah.
Okay, we're almost out of time. So I would encourage people to email us if you have other follow-up questions, or I apologize if we didn't get them. We did do our best to track all these different ways for people to communicate with us. Again, this will be posted on our website. The contact information for each speaker is in the presentation that is already posted. And we'd also love to hear your thoughts on what future webinar topics you'd like next week. We have Mark Costello from the SBA coming to talk about the loans again. And we're working with some of our local banks to come and talk about what hopefully will be known as far as their process to reach out. And I'm just going to give each speaker a minute to give any final thoughts, and then we'll say goodbye. So Dan?
I'm just unmuting myself, and I was just hitting send. I was just going to let everybody know, listen, I'm serious about my offer. If you are on this call, email me, dan@danweedin.com. We'll schedule a time to talk about your situation. If I can give any guidance on anything that I talked about today or anything that transpires between now and then, I want to help. So feel free to reach out to me by email, and we'll schedule a call.
Thanks, Dan. Monica?
I just I hope and pray that all of us can get through this in a very healthy and safe way. It's been fantastic to have everybody engaged through this and this webinar and be able to answer questions. So feel free to reach out to me. The other thing I was going to say is that we at West Sound Workforce are an essential business, and we are putting people out to work right now at other essential businesses. So if you have employees that you have had to lay off, even for a temporary time frame, and you want to give them an option, have them reach out to us at West Sound Workforce, and we can work to put them in employment, even on a temporary basis, until things kind of level out and come back to a little bit of normalcy. So thank you, and please do reach out and stay safe. Thanks.
Jaime?
All right. I was just going to say, if there's anything beyond, this webinar that you want help for your business, whether it's the loans or back to the regular business of helping businesses grow and expand, I'm part of a statewide network, and we support each other with our various expertises in various areas. So when you connect with the Kitsap Small Business Development Center, you're connecting to a statewide network of experts to help you in your business.
Thank you. And thank you again. We consider all of these folks our partners here at KEDA. Jaime and I share many clients as we, refer them back and forth. So this is truly a partnership to help everybody make it through this. Again, I ask you to track all the updates that we have available on our website and blog and social media. And I'd very much appreciate you taking the survey, and we will see you next week when we talk more about loans. Thank you.
Jaime, one quick note, won't you be having webinars on the SBDC's website for these loans specifically? I thought I saw something about that.
I just said that, yes. And so they can go on my slide, there's a place where they can go check where the webinars, do the webinar sign up through the WSBDC, the Washington SBDC, starting on April 8th.
Okay, great. Missed that.
Thank
Sorry.
you. And again, if you want to send some thoughts on future webinar topics, just email them to info@Kitsap EDA. Thanks again, and be well and be profitable. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.